Hello and welcome to Personality Types and Character Arcs. I'm Charles Kowalski, and today I'm going to share with you some tools that I hope will help you answer two fundamental questions about your character's journey. Where does it start, and where does it lead? I'd like to start with a couple of questions. I'll be asking 4 questions. They're multiple choice questions to which the answer will be a number from 1 to 9. You can answer them as yourself, but if you have a fiction work in progress, it might be more instructive to answer them from the point of view of your main character. The first question is, what would you most like to do with a free day? So take a moment to answer this, and you're welcome to pause the video if you need time to read through all the options. The second question is, if you suddenly came into possession of $1 million, what would you do with it? The third question, what did you hear yourself saying most often during the pandemic? And the final question, what is your personal idea of hell? Now, in answering these questions, you may have noticed that one number came up more often than the others. The 9 answers to the questions represent the 9 personality types of the Enneagram. You may have heard of this system. Its origins are lost in the mist of history. It may be based on ancient Greek philosophy or even earlier, but one thing that's certain is that since the early 20th century, it's been widely used as a tool for psychological and spiritual counseling. So the diagram shows the 9 points arranged around a circle and lines connecting them. The significance of those lines we'll explain in a few minutes. Each type has a name, although the names may vary depending on which source material you consult. And each type is based on a basic desire and a basic fear. The Enneagram types correspond loosely to Jungian archetypes, although not exactly, and each one also has its own corresponding passion. Since it passed through Christian mysticism, these are based on the 7 deadly sins plus 2. Each of the 9 types also has 9 levels of development. The highest level is ultimate attainment. Whatever it is that a person at this level wanted, they now have in such abundance that they can and do give it away. This is the level of ultimate attainment. The next 2 are within reach of that goal. Since there isn't much room for a person at this level to grow, if a person like this appears in your story, it's likely to be in the role of helper or mentor, someone who shows the protagonist what they can ultimately aspire to. The protagonist is likely to be in the middle levels, 4, 5, and 6. This person is still struggling and striving to attain their goals, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and may be prone to go into false starts or chase after imitations. And the bottom levels, 7, 8, and 9, these are so far from the goal of ultimate attainment that they will resort to any means to gain even a pathetic substitute, and at the same time are often consumed with envy and resentment towards people who have the real thing. These are good levels for villains in your story. And so, with 9 personality types and 9 levels of attainment, we have 81 potential starting points for a character's journey. So I'd like to go into a little bit more detail now about the 9 types and what they look like at the top, middle, and bottom levels. Type 1, the reformer. In one word, right. This person's deepest desire is to be right and good. Their greatest fear is to be seen as corrupt, evil, or defective. And what they need is to come to terms with human frailty in themselves and others, and to recognize that their way is not necessarily the best way or the only way. At the highest level, this person is so confident in their own grasp on the truth that they're willing to accommodate the possibility that there might be more than one way to the truth. The image here is of a judge, and if this person were in the legal profession, they would be the ideal Supreme Court justice, the Solomonic ideal of the wise judge, perhaps the kind mentioned in Truman Capote's In Cold Blood, of whom a detective said, "If I were innocent, he would be the first person I would want on the bench. If I were guilty, the last." At the middle levels, this could be the kind of person in every organization who drives everyone crazy, but without whom things would fall apart. The one who is always hyper-organized, always punctual, and always knows the right way to do things. But the lower you go down the scale, the more convinced this person is that there are only two ways of doing anything, their way and the wrong way. And at the bottom levels, it escalates into the kind of person who could happily torture you or burn you at the stake, convinced all the while that they were the good guys. The illustration here is of Claude Frollo, of whom the song says, "He yearned to purge the world of vice and sin, and he saw corruption everywhere except within." Type 2, the helper. In one word, love. What this person wants is to give and receive love. What they fear is being unwanted and unworthy of love. And what they need is to be able to recognize who they are as a person in their own right without depending for their self-image on being in a relationship with someone else. At the highest level, this person could be the second coming of Jesus, someone who is so filled to overflowing with love that they can embrace the whole world and not really care if it embraces them back. Without venturing quite as heartily as that, a person at the high levels can still be a great philanthropist and a loving figure not just to their own family, but to be the warm heart of their community, someone who makes their entire world a more loving place. At the middle levels, this could be exactly the kind of person that you want as a spouse, significant other, or friend. However, the lower you go down the scale, the more love they demand, and the less they're able to offer in return, until at the bottom levels, you can see that they are so desperate for affection and so terrified of losing it that they could, in extreme cases, make themselves psychosomatically sick in order to force others to take care of them, or else turn to stalking or other crimes of passion. Type 3, the achiever. In one word, success. What this person wants is to be number one at whatever field they've chosen. What they fear is to be seen as a failure or a loser. And what they need is to realize that a star player is still part of a team, that they have to work together with other human beings, and that the worth of these other people and their own worth is not directly proportional to their score at whatever game they happen to be playing in life. At the highest level, this person is the undisputed leader of their field. They know it, everyone knows it, there's no need to prove it, and they can afford to be generous with their time and expertise and offer a helping hand to up-and-comers. The ones at the middle level are still striving to achieve their goals, and the lower you go down the scale, the more this person wants to be number one, but the less willing they are to put in the time and effort and take the disappointments and humiliations that it takes to actually get there. And so they become preoccupied with presenting a false front, presenting a hyperinflated image of themselves, knocking others down to make themselves look good by comparison, and in extreme cases, resorting to any kind of desperate measures to eliminate anyone who might possibly get ahead of them. Type 4, the Individualist. In one word, self-expression. This is the type that has given the world most of its great artists. What they want is to express what's burning inside them. What they fear is to be denied that opportunity or to be seen as unoriginal or insignificant. And what they need is to get out of their own head and engage with the real world and real people from time to time. So at the highest level, this is an artist who is capable of expressing universal truth and sharing deep insights about human nature. The ones at the middle level are still struggling to find their artistic vision and express it. And the lower you go down the scale, the more they may fit the stereotype of the tortured, misunderstood artist, and they may actually lean into that stereotype and see themselves as exceptions, people for whom the rules and expectations of conventional society don't apply. And at the bottom, the stereotypical tortured artist, who may even be prone to self-destructive behavior. Type 5, the Investigator. In one word, knowledge. What this person wants is to understand the world and help others understand it. In terms of basic fears and basic needs, this type is very similar to the previous type. What they fear is being useless, helpless, or incapable, and what they need is often to be able to communicate with ordinary people in an ordinary way. At the highest levels, this is the type that has given the world most of its most brilliant scientists and inventors. So the ones at the highest level can be Nobel Prize winners. The ones in the middle are still striving, actively pursuing their research, and the lower you go down the scale, the more likely they are to fit the mold of the pseudo-intellectual, the dilettante, who learns a little bit about many fields, who loves to post controversial theories on social media just to get a reaction. And at the bottom levels, this person becomes so trapped within their own head that they can find themselves isolated, cut off from the outside world, and easy prey for the inner demons that may push them into schizophrenia, insomnia, paranoia, and obsessions. The character of John Nash in A Beautiful Mind was so compelling because he seemed to exist at both ends of this scale simultaneously, as a Nobel Prize-winning mathematician who was also a paranoid schizophrenic. Type 6, the Loyalist. In one word, security. What this person wants is a safe, stable, secure life with no risks. What they fear is anxiety and insecurity, and what they need is to come to terms with the unpredictability of life and the world we live in. At the highest levels, if you are in charge of any organization, this is the person you want at your right hand. They'll be unswervingly loyal to you, ready for any contingency, and if you ask them to do anything, the most likely response will be, "Sir, already done, sir." At the middle levels, this person is still the ideal employee or group member, solid citizen, and pillar of the community. However, it does have a dark side. The desire for security and stability includes a fear of anyone and anything that threatens that, and the strong identification with a group can translate into distrust of anyone outside that group, which leads very easily to racism and xenophobia. And at the bottom levels, This person is an easy mark for conspiracy theories and other types of extremism. There's probably a disproportionate number of low-level 6s in QAnon. Type 7, the Enthusiast. In one word, enjoyment. 7s just want to have fun. What they most desire is to enjoy life to the fullest. What they most fear is missing out, being bored or deprived, experiencing pain and suffering, and being alone with their own thoughts. And what they need is to find an internal source of satisfaction and fulfillment that makes them less dependent on constantly having stimuli from outside. At the highest levels, this person is the epitome of the epicure, someone for whom enjoyment of the finer things in life is practically a religious experience. If you have a friend at this level, and they call you up and say, "Would you care to join me for dinner and a concert?" prepare to be transported. At the middle levels, this person is always up for a night out on the town or a lively party. But if you say, "Oh, I don't really feel like going out tonight," they're likely to say, "Hey, come on, don't be a party pooper, you only live once." The lower you go down the scale, the less the enjoyment of life becomes a source of satisfaction and fulfillment in itself, and the more it becomes a mask for a deep inner emptiness. And so, at the bottom levels, this person is terrified of being alone with their thoughts, having to look into their own hearts, and will just spend their lives in a mad rush from one experience to the next, from one thrill to the next. And this could very easily lead to addictions and compulsions, be it alcohol, gambling, shopping, or what have you. Type 8, the Challenger. In one word, power. What this person wants is to have power and control over others. What they fear is to be in a situation where they can be hurt or controlled by others, or being seen as weak. And what they need is to be able to recognize and show their own vulnerable side, especially to the people closest to them, because unless they attain that skill, they have real trouble forming long-term relationships, especially romantic ones. At the highest level, this person is the Platonic ideal of the philosopher king, the embodiment of chivalry, the one who has power and uses it to help others. At the middle levels, this person may range from the boss you wish you had to the boss you wish you didn't have. And the lower you go down the scale, the more convinced they are that might makes right, and the less tolerant they are of any challenge to their power, until at the bottom levels, a person in this category, if they have actual power, could be a brutal dictator, and if they don't, a dangerous criminal. And finally, point 9. And before we go into detail in this one, I'd like to pause a moment for a brief math quiz. Relax, it will be easy. First, I'd like to ask you to choose a number from 1 to 10. Any number. Now, add 9 to that number. You now have a 2-digit number. Add the 2 digits together. You have the number you started with. It's as if you didn't do anything. Now, one more question. Pick another number from 1 to 10. Now, multiply that number by 9. Again, you have a 2-digit number, so add the 2 digits together. You have 9. This is the mystery of the number 9. It adds nothing, but it absorbs everything. And this characteristic is reflected in this personality type too. At first glance, you might think that this is the personality type that's personality-less. But this is the kind of person who can also transform a situation just by their presence. the impartial mediator, and Peacemaker. At the highest levels, this person is an enlightened soul, someone who has transcended the ego and become one with the universe. At the middle levels, they are definitely not the person you would depend on to be the life of the party. You would call your 7 friend for that. If you asked your 9 friend, "Oh, where would you like to go tonight?" their response is likely to be, "Oh, I don't care, whatever you want." But if you have had the day from hell, and you're feeling, I can't take it anymore, this is the friend you would call. You would meet for tea, you would talk, they would listen, and an hour later you would be saying, I guess life isn't so bad after all. The unique gift of the 9 is to be able to absorb all of the negativity in a situation, to see multiple sides of every issue, and to mediate a solution. However, their own feelings, needs, and desires tend to take second place to the goal of keeping the peace with others. And if their own feelings are repressed for too long, then it leads to problems. It can either lead to suddenly lashing out, or else giving up on life, saying, whatever, and in extreme cases, falling into schizotypal, passive-aggressive, or even dissociative identity disorder. By now, you've probably figured out which type I am, and it appears I have Frodo Baggins for company. You could do worse. But if you look at the results, you'll see that I score very highly for one particular type, but other types also are present to a greater or lesser degree. And I'd like especially to call your attention to the second and third bars on this graph, type 5 and type 4. So this is often the case, that someone who shows strong characteristics of one type will also show characteristics nearly as strong of an adjacent type. In Enneagram parlance, these are called wings. Some of these wings seem to be natural combinations. 4 and 5, for example, are both very concerned with contributing to the world through the product of their own minds. Others are a bit more counterintuitive. For example, 9, which is so accepting and self-effacing, is sandwiched in between 8 and 1, both of which can be very judgmental and self-assertive. However, everything that rises converges. And when 8 and 9 meet at the highest levels, what you see is a figure like Yoda, someone with tremendous power and at the same time a deep inner peace and sense of their connectedness to the universe. And when 1 meets 9 at those levels, you get a figure like Gandhi or the Dalai Lama, someone who is very committed to peace and nonviolence, but at the same time has a very strong sense of justice and a passionate belief in a cause. And as you can see, when characteristics of adjoining types are present in the same person, it can cause an internal conflict right there when their 2 wings are pulling them in different directions. So what does all of this mean in terms of character arcs? Well, here is a visual representation of the typical positive change arc. A character sets off on a journey towards something they want, but invariably they find the way blocked. So the character has to take a detour. They have to go down before they go up. And this journey may take them into uncharted territory. It may take them to the place where their most dearly held assets are of no use to them and may even be liabilities. This journey may take them to the place that, as we saw in the questions you answered at the beginning of today's workshop, they may consider hell. But sooner or later, they will discover that this is the path that leads to something they need. And around the midpoint, they may see clearly that they have a choice. They can go off in pursuit of the thing that they wanted at first, or they can stay on the steeper and rougher path that they are on now, which will lead to the thing they need. most cases, they will make the wrenching choice to stay on the path, attain the thing they need, and when they've done that, they'll usually find that on the way back down, they can attain the thing they want. That is, if they still want it. Because in terms of personality types, the thing the character wanted is usually something that would keep them in the same type at the same level, or at best, maybe move them 1 or 2 levels up within the same type. A type 2 might say, oh, I want the love of this or that person. A type 3 might say, I want this award or that promotion. A type 6 might say, I want a stable life surrounded by familiar people with no risk. And a 7 might say, I want more fun. None of these makes for a particularly compelling story. What we want to see in a character's journey is a fundamental transformation. We want to see the character facing a challenge that causes them to discover qualities they never even knew they had. And the Enneagram contains a built-in roadmap for this type of journey. This is where the lines in the diagram come in. As you can see, these lines have arrows on them, and it indicates what's called the direction of integration. As a person ascends through the levels of development for one type, they tend also to take on the characteristics of the next type in the direction of integration. You can see, for example, how types 3, 6, and 9 form a triangle. And you can also see how that makes sense. The 3 is very focused on the self, the individual. Type 6 puts the individual second place to the group. Type 9 puts both individual and group second place to the greater cosmic harmony. And then the greatest challenge for the 9 is to rediscover and reclaim the self, which brings the character full circle back to type 3, back where they started, but at a higher level. The other 6 types also have their journey. It's a longer and slightly more convoluted road, but we can see it clearly if we look at the example of a very well-known character from a timeless classic of English literature. Iron Man. I feel it's instructive to look at popular culture characters like these because we can see the evolution of their character over the course of several films. In the case of Iron Man, aka Tony Stark, when we first meet him, he is a billionaire playboy. In Enneagram terms, type 7 at level 5. Someone who has a brilliant brain, but who is more concerned with enjoying life using the billions that he inherited from the company that his father built. Then, he's taken prisoner in Afghanistan and has a dark night of the soul. When he finally escapes and finds his way back to the States, that's when he begins putting this brilliant mind of his to use, inventing this high-tech suit that's eventually going to become the symbol of his new identity. And this identity is not just a superhero, but a leader among superheroes, and a responsible one at that. He is the one who takes the stance that, as superheroes, we have all of this power, we are in such a position of public trust, we should be held accountable by someone, even though this stance puts him into conflict with his friend Captain America. And towards the end of his journey, we see him retired from superheroism to take on the persona of a devoted husband and father, someone for whom the most important thing in life is love. And the final, heart-wrenching choice he has to make is between love for his family and love for all humanity. So as the character of Iron Man evolves, you can see him moving up through the levels of development, and whether his creators realize this or not, it follows the pattern contained within the Enneagram, moving within the direction of integration. 7 integrates to 5, 5 to 8, and 8 to 2. So here we've seen an example of a 7 integrating to 5, and you can probably think of examples from the other types, from literature or film. Now, in addition to the positive change arc, we also have the negative change arcs, the disillusionment arc, the corruption arc, and the fall arc. And all of these start off in a similar way to the positive change arc, which is of the character believing something that turns out not to be true. In the case of the positive change arc, the character will see the truth and put the lie to one side in their pursuit of the truth. Here, in the disillusionment arc, the character will see through the lie they believed at first, but then discover that the new truth is tragic. A classic example of this is The Great Gatsby. Then in a corruption arc, the character may believe the lie, see the truth but reject it, and continue to cling to the lie. Or in the fall arc, believe a worse lie. For a negative change arc, we have the direction of disintegration, which, as you can see, is the same as the direction of integration, except that the arrows go in reverse. And once again, we can see an example of this in a character from popular culture, Darth Vader. In the same way that 8 integrates to 2, 2 disintegrates to 8, and we can see that in this character's journey. At first, the most important thing for him was love. But then, after he loses someone he loves, he begins to believe the lie that if I get enough power, I won't have to suffer this kind of loss again. And his stubborn belief in that lie ultimately leads him to bring upon himself the very disaster he was hoping to avoid. This is one example. You can probably think of others, either from real-life examples or your own imagination. And sometimes you see an example of disintegration followed by reintegration. And I would like to show you one final example from a true classic of French cinema. Ratatouille. Anton Ego is an example of a 7 who disintegrated to 1. You can see that he was once an epicure, someone for whom the enjoyment of fine dining was a source of joy, happiness, and satisfaction. However, years of searching for something that would be up to his imagined standard and not finding it has turned him into the cynical, bitter restaurant critic whom every chef in Paris fears as a killer of careers. Until one bite of that magical ratatouille reminds him of why food was so important to him in the first place. So let me close with a few questions to review to help you apply these principles to your own work in progress. At what type and level does your main character begin their journey? Does your character have a strong subtype that could create dramatic tension? What's the thing your character wants? What's the thing your character needs? And how could a different personality type give your character the opportunity to grow and become fully realized? If you want to know more about the Enneagram, there is lots of information out there. Riso and Hudson's book is a great place to start, as is the website based on it, enneagraminstitute.com. And there are a great number of Enneagram tests online. I've listed 3, all of which rank the top types or all of the 9 types in order, rather than simply generating a single number and saying, this is your type. So I hope that in the course of today's workshop, I've given you some tools that can help you chart the course of your character's journey, and perhaps even your own. Thank you very much, and happy writing.